Thank you, Guido. Now we move to screenless marketing. Voice has been everywhere. Anyone who attended CES last year, you probably know every third booth or every third announcement was a new integration with Alexa. And we're going to have a discussion on basically when screenless marketing, when voice is king. This is being led by Jordan Green, Mello Media principal and longtime friend of MediaPost. He's been on the forefront of mobile technology for over a decade, and I will turn this all over to Jordan.
Just going to wait for everybody else. I think it's fair to say that this isn't the future we were all promised. It's 2017, and what we are calling artificial intelligence is really only at its larva stage. In my opinion, we're slapping that label on it way too prematurely. Currently, all we're doing is processing vast amounts of data through linear algebraic algorithms. There's no creative thought occurring by the machines, it's just processing. So there's an expression in robotics that technology is overestimated in the short term and underestimated in the long term. That feels awfully applicable for 2017 AI. But it's not alone in this undelivered future. Where's your flying car and hoverboard? Where's your home-based robot who cooks and cleans? Where's your pocket communicator that can seemingly do an infinite number of things and preoccupies you while watching a screenless marketing panel? Okay, so that last one, that has been delivered to us. And I'll do you one better. The mobile phone is the foundation for this evolution of technology, as well as the lighter fluid for helping new initiatives like voice progress and develop at a much faster pace than its predecessors. For 2017, it marks my 19th year in this world of mobile. And at Mello Media, we provide reality-based strategy, marketing, and massive mobile media buying services for our clients who are all buyers, sellers, and investors in the mobile ecosystem. And now part of that discussion is the development of voice marketing initiatives. And I can tell you clearly that we have seen this movie before. The development of the voice space is paralleling the app, web, and even text message marketing environments almost perfectly. Tell me if any of this sounds familiar. One dominant platform with other established tech players trying to play catch-up. Seemingly inadequate analytics that developers have no choice to cling to and even praise. Not ready for prime-time advertising and monetization methods. A limited ecosystem with content that will be mostly dismissed and discarded quickly. And brands using test budget to see if they can somehow market themselves as content providers, which is not their forte when it comes to consumer marketing. With all that being said, consumers are excited. They're really excited. And this is true for all kinds of consumers now, and not just early adopters. And that drives brands and agencies to be intrigued with potential purpose now as well. Technologists and developers keep pushing ways to satisfy and further excite these consumers. So what this is ripe territory for some smart brand people to build a new ecosystem, and that's what we've assembled here today. So next to me is Russ Goldman from Mindshare, Greg Hedges from Rain, Sargi Mann from Havas, and Doug Robinson from Fresh Digital Group. So I'm starting off with you. No, actually, I'm starting off with Greg, so you can jump in here at any point. I meant the other you. According to Experian, 51% of all of these Amazon Echoes are in a kitchen, and I would personally say that number's probably too low. Really early on, your team grasped onto this for Campbell's. What was the whole process that your team put together for this whole conversational strategy? How did you go about building this skill and so on?
Sure. So with Campbell's, we'd actually been working with them for a few years and looking at where the opportunity was for them to really connect with consumers in the digital space. And specifically, we had spent some time digging in with all of their digital properties and found that recipes were the sweet spot. That's what consumers want. Not surprising in a lot of different ways. We all kind of have that daily question that comes to our mind, what am I going to make for dinner tonight? And so in looking at that and looking at the power that it had for Campbell's, seeing that it actually drove sales for them, we had data from Datalogix and IRI that told us exactly that. that interactions with the Campbell's Kitchen platform drove sales. Pairing that with the fact that consumers had this renewable daily need, we saw a lot of opportunity for the platform. So we built out this digital ecosystem, and as part of that, we thought about what territories that Campbell's could own, and authority, being an authority in the kitchen was one of them. Not one of those kind of talk down to type of authorities, but a coach, someone who can help you answer that question and guide you through the process. And voice became a very natural extension of that when you think about it. Because you don't necessarily want, when you have a question, you get a list of answers when you go to Google. But what about if you could get one answer? What if you get a simple answer? What if you get that direction that you need? And so we thought a lot about how conversation could be enacted, and Amazon had just opened up the platform for developers to build. And so we saw a way to then extend that strategy into voice and spend a lot of time figuring out what was the right opportunity there, how could we enact a strategy which we espouse called crawl, walk, run, which is very familiar from app territory and product territory. But how do we get in the market, become a first mover? Campbell's was the first food CPG on the platform, so we got a lot of earned media off of that, but also there was a lot of space there. Discoverability now with 15,000 skills can be a little bit more difficult than it was back then. But we were able to enact a strategy that would allow us to act then and evolve over time. And we just released another version for the Echo Show, optimized for the Echo Show. It's voice-based as well, so you can use it with any of the Alexa devices. But where you can take the experience further. We always knew visuals were important, so now we can have, think about how enticing it is to see a dish that you're interested in cooking. But we also were able to work in a cooking experience, so take advantage of the fact of the placement of the Echo, where people are bringing these devices into their homes, and follow the journey with them as they're cooking and preparing the dish as well.
So I love the fact that it's very straightforward and it's exactly what people would expect there. But what have you learned since the first version of it? What have you learned from the data that's come back one way or another that was unexpected?
The first version was very light in terms of the categories that people get into. And we really found people wanted to push the boundaries. You want what you want. You don't want to be in this walled garden of content. You want to be able to dig in and say that I want kid-friendly recipes, or that I'm interested in a cheeseburger, or whatever it is that you want at that moment. So we really found that people were looking to push the platform almost immediately, and could see where the territories were. And they really did want to extend that experience into the cooking world. They wanted to have a companion. They know that when you're working in the kitchen and they have their tablet out, that was the next step for them. But they were getting all their pasta sauce and greasy hands all over it. So they really did want someone an experience that would allow them to kind of cook smarter and easier.
Okay. So, and what you ended up creating here was, this is pretty much a standalone product in its own right. And now watch me transition this over to Russ. Russ, your team has actually been very emphatic about the idea that these things shouldn't be standalone products and be part of a tied into a larger marketing program. I guess my question is, how do you do that?
How do you do that? So that's been my sort of philosophy from day one. I think particularly coming from Mindshare, which is a media agency, 99% of the organization looks at new technology as a way to activate a new media campaign that lives and then dies. For me, I think part of taking a product approach to this is just making sure that we have a product process, which is very similar to what Greg was describing. So when you go about creating your first skill, making sure that you're taking a research-heavy approach, looking at all of the brand documents, what's happening in the marketplace, understanding what users want based on what's available today, and maybe if you have the opportunity to interview or survey potential users, using all of that information to come up with your original concept, and then working with developers to actually bring it to life. And part of the product process is also, as you were talking to Greg about, is looking at the data on the back end, making sure that you have an eye, that you have a vision when you start of where the product can go. So similar to what Greg was saying about having a crawl, walk, run experience in mind, that you're driving towards something, but then using the data to inform your phase two. Obviously, from the agency side, that's a little bit difficult because we don't hold the budgets, but I think it's important for us as influencers to have that in mind so that we can influence the outcome on the client side. And then obviously, I think triangulating or pairing that vision that we have with everything that's happening at Amazon, because it's sort of a moving target.
Are you going as far as to use, because you guys invest in digital, are you going as far to say like an online ad would have a call to action telling you to enable a skill on your Echo?
So the Echo is sort of the experience that we develop. I think I look at as a product, but in a product process, you also have the go-to-market process or the go-to-market strategy. And I think there too, we also have, I wouldn't say a product mindset, but definitely have a vision of where we're trying to take the experience. And we really tie the marketing side together with the product side. So, we do see now that there is a lot of interest from the clients this year, if you compare it to last year, in applying that vision both on the product side and on the marketing side. So incorporating call to actions related to Alexa across other channels within marketing. I think Alexa no longer is sort of thought of as a standalone emerging technology that's on the sidelines, but something that should be integrated into larger campaign programs. And then I think going back to this idea of having a vision on the marketing side, I think I've always taken the position that we need to be thinking about this product and the features of the product and understanding its position in sort of the life cycle marketing of a customer for whatever brand that we're working with. So thinking about the data that we're collecting, not just to inform the product, but the data that we're collecting from like a marketing technology perspective and how we're going to, in the future, connect marketing technology with ad tech to eventually drive a customer not only to engage with the actual experience, but to drive them to actually buy something.
Got it. So Sargi,
Hi.
you and I are a very similar mind. Like, I view one of my primary jobs as providing for my clients and understanding a context, a purpose for whatever new technology they're going to invest in. Now, you have a different approach because you have to sell this inside Havas. How do you do that?
So I think I actually want to take a step back from a lot of what we're talking about because I want to put it in the context of the consumer and the businesses. I think a lot of what we're talking about and the way at Havas Media, we approach all of this is how many of us have heard the phrase or used the phrase, right consumer, right time, right context, right device? Show of hands. Heard it, used it, right? And I think fundamentally what Greg is talking about and what Russell's also mentioned is we think about is the piece that we talk about context. I think that's the most rich fabric that with voice that we have the opportunity to unlock. So the way I talk about it is if our responsibility as marketers and as brands is to make ourselves relevant to the consumer, it's not about selling, it's about contextualizing. So voice search, I feel like when we talk about it, every development in digital is an opportunity for business to be relevant for the future. When search came, it was an opportunity for a local business to be contending with the multi-billion-dollar businesses. With voice, there's an opportunity for brands to leapfrog their competition who they have not been able to outrank on SEO. To say, forget that. I don't have to optimize for that experience. I have to build for that experience. And that's what we lead with is it's all about the right context that we have the opportunity to unlock now.
And behind all this, you need to understand the stuff that's going to happen once you build it, right? Doug, you guys have taken a really interesting approach to how you're building out a very quiet analytics ecosystem over there. That, and I think in a year, we're going to have a very different conversation with you.
Yeah, we have the most products of any company in the marketplace now, right? So we have 200 skills that are live on all 3 platforms in 15 categories. So we're looking at the data that we can glean now to really understand how do we get to personalization and how do we get to this context, right? If you look at the 3 different systems, Cortana, Google, and Amazon, there's very little context baked into the Amazon Alexa because it doesn't have not only a mobile platform to write on, but it doesn't have the search capabilities you're talking about, right? You have Bing on Microsoft, and you have Google, obviously, with Google Home. So the idea of Amazon consistently flooding the market with the show or the fashion thing or the new fire that can all be, vehicles for me to engage is really Amazon's play to maintain this 70% market share and be the leader in the home. But the long time war probably is going to possibly go over to Google because of the global, and all these other elements that the context is already baked in. So when we think about personalization from an individual perspective, one of the reasons that we want to have a lot of different products is not only to help our clients understand that we get it, but also that we can come up with the ideas and then come up with the content that makes sense for those brands in that moment that then resonate with the consumers wherever they are, right? Whether it's in their pocket, and I'm like, hey Siri, who's actually going to work in like a month, she's going to be really hot. Hey Siri, I want this, or hey, Cortana, I need that. They're all different vehicles, so we feel pretty good about our understanding of all three of them.
What's interesting is Siri was the one, she got her nose all bloodied by running through that wall and broke through voice for us all, and then has fallen into the background a lot. We don't talk about it. We're a third of the way through the panel so far, give or take, and that's the first mention of Siri, okay? On the flip side, we're talking about Google Home and Alexa on the same platform, on the same plateau right now, and it's really not, right? They're really far behind. Google's really far behind in this. In a year, are we looking at them as equals? And is Cortana even a relevant term to even say aloud any longer?
Well, I definitely, again, as someone who has the most skills of anyone in the room.
Sorry.
I definitely
He's very involved with Cortana. I didn't want to get all that for you.
I definitely think that Cortana, let's look at it this way. Okay, so if I buy a Microsoft anything, I have to engage with Cortana to launch the device, right? Laptop, phone, etc. When you look at Google Assistant's already baked into 1 billion devices, right? So if I'm in India right now, I just got the internet, a smartphone, voice, and video. So when we think about all, right, and also if I'm Microsoft, I'm business. I've got Microsoft Office, I've got email. So if I'm a sales guy in my car, I can say, Cortana, pull this up. Cortana, pull that up. So I think Cortana is going to be fairly relevant. I think right now she's just kind of chilling, but I would definitely say that she is not to be not looked at seriously.
All right, to tee it up for the rest of you guys now, Siri also baked into well over 1 billion devices. We're getting a HomePod that's going to show up, and I'm sure that'll be everyone's favorite Christmas buy. But the question is, do they open up in a similar environment at some point, like Alexa?
I think that's been the biggest issue for their success. I mean, the first problem was recognition. There was a lot of getting bloodied based on the fact that she couldn't understand you properly, and so she took her lumps for that. But I think the other part is that it's a closed environment, as Apple is known to create, and the capturing the excitement of the consumers, which you were talking about earlier, is something that Alexa and Google Home now has been able to do because of the reach they have into opening up these experiences. They've created an excitement in the developer community, they've created excitement in the branded world, and they've allowed for people to really, for brands and organizations to work conversation not as a product, because I think going back to the talk about Campbell's, it wasn't a product, it was actually an important part of their extended ecosystem for Campbell's Kitchen. So brands are able to figure out, how is this going to become a channel? How is conversation going to become a channel within my larger digital marketing ecosystem? Because it is going to play a role that will be on par with social, that will be on par with mobile and with websites and other digital marketing efforts. So I think the fact, again, that Siri has been closed off, and I don't think it's going to change, so I don't know that she's going to get a new face anytime soon, because I haven't. They kind of reveal these little pieces that they're going to give some openness to the driving apps of the world, or so the Ubers and the Lyfts can get a play, or some other aspects, but they're still holding on so tight, and I think that's the biggest problem for its success, even though it is in more places than any of the other assistants. And what you're seeing now is actually the choice that's being given to people. So Samsung's coming out with their products. They have their own agent. They have Bixby. But they're actually giving users a choice of which they want to work with. Do you want Google Assistant? Do you want Alexa? And so I think we're seeing that play out, that there's this avenue of choice, and that you might turn to some of these assistants in their areas of expertise the way we might turn to each other based on our individual areas of expertise in order to get what we need from someone.
I think also, I mean, when it comes to Siri, there's really nothing to talk about with respect to voice right now, just to be really clear.
Dude, you guys are haters. Have you seen iOS 11?
I mean, we'll talk about it when there's...
Do you even know what's happening in the next month?
When there's something to talk about, we'll talk about it. But like 6 months ago, I think when we were on a similar panel, we also were all saying that the only game in town was Alexa. And I think that between then and now, like, that's definitely changed. I think two things, like one that Greg was mentioning, which is about choice. The ecosystem has definitely changed to enable that amount of choice. So probably within the past 6 months, maybe 6 to 8 months, there have been the platforms on which developers can develop these experiences have gone from being, Alexa specific or platforms that kind of force people to make a choice to enabling decision makers to decide to develop experiences that run across platforms. And I think also that has also happened within the broader conversational UI space. So brands now have the ability to have that choice between platforms for voice, but also developing a larger roadmap for conversational that is across voice and chatbots. And I think the other thing is that between 6 months ago and now is that Google, I think, is part of the conversation. I mean, 6 months ago wasn't really, I probably would have said the same thing about Google as I just said about Siri, but then Google opened up their platform, and I think the conversation on voice right now still leads us to think about IoT devices, but Google is also, has voice on, like Siri, as a voice assistant, and we can create these experiences for voice assistants that run across mobile and IoT, and Google is very relevant internationally, and I think brands are starting to pay attention to that fact when they're thinking about voice.
So if Google wasn't relevant 6 months ago, just imagine what 6 months from now will look like. And you have 4 platforms that we're all talking about, bring your haters back. But let me ask you this. So we have 4 platforms, give or take, that we're using for voice. Should we just be repurposing, and this is an incredibly loaded question, should we be repurposing web content that goes across a voice environment, or do we have to rethink it altogether?
I'd say we have to rethink it because we talk about, and I want to build on the fact, you talked earlier about mobile, the evolution of mobile. And I think this is where we were when mobile became the tipping point, almost like every year is the year of mobile for the last 10 years. And that was the challenge that we got handheld in, is we talked about optimizing our desktop experience to a completely new device. And that shortchanged a lot of the brands. And I think if we have that same approach today, we would be doing a disservice to the brands and to the consumers' intellectual capability to say, we think you're the same person on a desktop, on a mobile, and when you're reading versus when you're talking. I think we have to rethink and you've done it, and we are approaching at Havas Media, we are thinking about it to say, it's not the same shoe on a different foot, it's a new foot. You have to make a new shoe.
It goes back to that, you're talking about context earlier. I think that you really do have to understand what's right in what situation and what individuals are looking for. And I think you're actually probably going to see voice drive changes within even website content because of the fact that voice search is becoming more and more prevalent every day. And brands are going to need to find ways, organizations are going to need to find ways to make sure that they're using that conversational data, that knowledge, and the behavior that consumers have in order to surface the right content. So you absolutely can't repurpose web content. You can look to it for areas of opportunity, certainly. So if I'm looking for places where consumers are already having a conversation with me, that's a data point in that, and that's something that I can take and add into other data points that I have in order to create the right experience. But you absolutely have to treat it as a new foot.
One thing I want to call out is, we've heard multiple times today and over the last few months and some time, where the perception is that AI and any new innovation is expensive and it's a barrier. One thing I want to say is the biggest opportunity we have is the voice search capability is not complete novelty to us. How many of us and how many businesses today have a call center number that we have associated with? We're sitting on a rich data mine of people actually talking to us in our call centers. That's a wealth of information that sits in the format that we want it in. Let's start listening in. We have to start paying attention to say how people have interacted with us versus our desktop and how they talk to us when they talk to us in a call center. And that's the first stage of our approach. So the one thing I would say is there's so much opportunity, and I love behavioral psychology, and Daniel Kahneman, as we all know, is a very renowned person. And from that standpoint, I feel we're at the brink of setting ourselves with a bias, that it's a new thing and it's going to be hard to work with. It's not a new thing, it's going to be new to work with, but definitely not hard. It just is a different cultural approach we need.
So then how do you move it along? How do you move it along? if I agree with what you're saying. How do we move from novelty to necessity? If we're sitting in the first inning, what's the big step that moves to the second inning? Let Doug jump in on this because he's got that.
Well, I mean, the big step, I mean, again, we're moving a lot faster than anyone even thinks. And I think the 3 or 4 of us completely understand that what we were thinking in May versus what we were thinking even in July and what we're thinking now are completely different, right? Regardless of the platform. And the idea is that voice is not for ads, right? It's really around utility. What none of us are really thinking about and talking about is that, like, voice is kind of the first thing you learn, right? So this thing works for 2-year-olds, because if you look at anyone that has a 2-year-old and how they're excited about their Alexa in the home, and it also works for 80-year-olds, right? I can't even see, but Alexa, tell me what time it is. So you have something that runs the continuum of humanity on one level. And then you start thinking about it around, okay, well, let's look at the conversational design and the fact that we have a zero UI opportunity here, right? When I go to a website, someone made that user experience for me, and that's how I got to play. When I open my phone, that experience is made for me. But when we're talking about voice, I expect when I say something, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. So when I go, order my Uber, order my pizza, order the toilet paper, those are things that I'm creating with my voice, and I expect that answer to be handled. And so those are completely different pieces of this whole thing, which makes us getting from the first inning to the second inning pretty easy. And I think that we've already seen that happen this year. I think at the beginning of the year, we looked at this whole market as like an 8 million virtual assistant thing, where we already know by the end of this year, we're going to be sitting at 1 billion. It's a pretty good chance by the end of next year, we'll be sitting at 3 billion of people that can access voice from some device, somewhere, anywhere, anytime.
So now that we're talking about your toilet paper, the retail environment is very interesting because it's a natural tie-in using Amazon and Echo and connect it together. And now you've got companies like Google and Walmart getting together. Is that interesting to you as the next evolution of retail?
They don't have a choice.
Oh, yeah.
It's interesting. It's definitely interesting, and I would say one of the things Doug mentioned earlier is about Alexa. I would like to say that I do see Alexa as a stronger player than Google, fundamentally because we talked earlier about the place of context, and when we talk about how much my Amazon knows about me. It knows when I became a member. It knows the life stages I go through. They know what I get for my groceries. They know what kind of toilet paper I like, what's in my kitchen, what's in my pantry, what's in my bathroom, what's in my living room. They have the entire context of my life with them. For Google and Walmart, the key thing to note is how does the utility piece come together? We're talking about 2 distinct utilities, data architectures, handling of information. The challenge is going to lie how smooth and seamless that integration becomes. And where does the consumer not feel the friction of the handoff between one to the other?
I think experience has shown us we're going to see the friction. But in a second, if you have a question, just put your hand up because you're working around.
I mean, commerce is, when the phone rings and people are asking about voice, the end game is not to just create this fun, trivia experience or a novelty experience. They want to understand how this is going to move business for them. So it goes back to the Campbell's talk I had earlier. Tide is another brand that we worked with. You can't necessarily order unless you have the ability to fulfill right now. So like a Starbucks can certainly work and fulfill orders for its consumers. But that you can see where the evolution is going, and organizations want to get in now to understand how their consumers are talking and how they can build that roadmap to where commerce has actually become more prevalent on these experiences.
Question in the back.
So this question's for Doug. You've built hundreds of skills. Just curious if you could share any examples of how some of those skills are potentially showing some ROI for their clients or some sort of return.
Right, so we've got a UNICEF skill that's focused and matched with a Fitbit for kids. And the idea is how do we create a shared family experience in the living room using exercise. So we've created like some action adventure games, and so the family can kind of play and do jumping jacks and all that. And then kind of towards the end of it, you're able to kind of get a quotient for energy that's been created. And then around that, we then send food packets based on that energy. So the idea is that we can create this, family experience across the world where then we can save lives.
I think the other part of the ROI model for all this is the fact that for every brand, it's going to be relative, right? So everyone's calling us and also asking, like, where's the return on investment from this? Should I act now? And where can I see the most value? And you really do have to think about, what's right for them. So we spend a lot of time investing and understanding what the business objectives for these organizations are. And so for some, it's going to be data collection, and others, it's going to be creating a new point of commerce, and for others, it's going to be lead generation, like some work we've done with an insurance company called Safeco. So there is a varying model to what the value is, but there is certainly value for every organization that can be found in voice, and is also going to evolve over time. So where is that now, and how is that going to change over time?
Yeah, voice should be the glue to your multi-channel strategy. So the ROI that you can glean, regardless of the vertical or the audience you're trying to reach, is totally there. Exactly what Greg's saying.
Last brief question.
Hi, I'm Jenna with the Graham List, and this question's for anyone who wants to take it, but how do you feel the consumer will balance privacy fears with opening up to using voice search in all facets of life?
They've already gone there. We're already in 15%. Amazon's already in 50% of American homes. So the privacy issue, although your dad and my dad are like, I don't want that thing going on, the reality is if I'm 11 to 30, I'm kind of okay with it, right? And if I'm 30 to 50, I'm probably okay with it if it's adding value to my life. So, I mean, I don't think any of us can say that moving forward, that's a concern at all. In fact, it's probably going to wind up adding value. I mean, it's already saved a life, right? I mean, so I don't think
it's really a value trade, right? Like, I'm willing to give Uber my location wherever I am because I just need to have easy access to it every time I open up my phone. I'm not going to go shut it off every time. Same with Waze. We were willing to trade data for ease of access, and I think people, as they approach any new technology, are going to pump the brakes. There's going to be a lot of talk about how they're getting closer and closer and closer to our bedrooms. They're going to hear everything that we do, but it's really about what am I getting from this? And I think that's the tipping point of it all. It's I'm getting all this extra value. I can get the questions I want answered immediately, and therefore here you go. Here's open access.
I'm throwing in my 2 cents on this. For the last 20 years, Amazon has spent all this time developing a trust with us, and we're willing to have this veil of ignorance because we trust in that Amazon brand and putting that in our home. We've come to feel comfortable with them for long enough that that's pretty much okay. I've got to stop there. That's so. If you want to talk to any of us, we'll hang out in the back. But thanks very much for my panel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I love that. The veil of ignorance. Brilliant.